The judge didn't come to deliver good news. He came to deliver an ultimatum. Marry within 30 days or lose everything. 6 years of blood and sweat, 640 acres carved from nothing with his own 2 hands. All of it would be auctioned off because some politician decided a man needed a wife to own his own land. Ethan Hale had learned a long time ago that relying on anyone but himself was a good way to end up broke or buried. His father had lost everything chasing dreams. His mother had died from a broken heart and hard times. He didn't need love. He needed a legal signature. Enter Clara Whitfield, 26 years old, considered too old for a good marriage back east, too educated for most jobs, too poor to be independent. She didn't come looking for rescue. She came looking for respect. He offered her a business deal with separate bedrooms. She demanded her name on the deed. He wanted a signature. She wanted a partnership. But what happens when the man who's built walls around his heart finally meets someone brave enough to tear them down? The walls we build to protect ourselves are often the very prisons that keep us from truly living. This story proves that needing someone isn't weakness. It's the bravest choice we can make. And sometimes the arrangement we're forced into becomes the life we would have chosen all along. If you've ever been scared to let someone in, drop a comment telling me what you're learning to trust. And if you want more stories about imperfect people choosing each other anyway, hit subscribe and ring that bell. Your support means everything. The Arizona sun beat down on Iron Creek Ranch without mercy. Ethan Hale watched 3 riders kick up dust on the road. He recognized the lead horse. It belonged to Judge Horace Piton, a man who thought he held more power than God Almighty. Ethan's jaw set like stone. A visit from the judge never meant good news. At 28, he was lean and tough, shaped by 6 hard years of turning useless scrub into a working ranch. His hands were a road map of scars from wire and wood. He had learned a long time ago that relying on anyone but yourself was a good way to end up broke or buried. The riders stopped, and Judge Piton climbed down from his horse. He was a man gone soft in the middle, with graying whiskers and eyes that saw everything. The judge got straight to the point. "Ethan," he said, skipping the friendly talk, "we need to have a word." Ethan stayed put on his porch. "I did not know I had business with the court." "You do now," Piton said, nodding to his clerk and a marshal. "This is about the legal status of your land." Every muscle in Ethan's body went tight. The ranch. It was always about the ranch. He had filed his claim by the book and worked the land for 6 years straight. But out here the law could change like the weather. "Then say what you came to say," Ethan told him, not budging. The judge's face hardened. "All right. The government passed new settlement laws for any claim over 500 acres. To keep your land, you have to prove you have established a family household." Ethan's hands balled into fists. "I live here all year. This is as permanent as it gets." "A family household means a wife, Mr. Hale," Piton stated flatly. He pulled out a piece of paper. "You have 30 days to get married. If you do not, you forfeit the claim. The land goes up for auction." The words felt like a punch to the gut. 30 days. Get married or lose everything he had worked for. "That is insane," Ethan said, his voice low and dangerous. "I poured 6 years of my life into this place." "The law is the law," the judge said, his tone firm. "I do not like it any more than you do. It is a fool rule made by politicians who have never done a day of honest work. But it is the law." "So just go find a wife," the marshal chimed in. "Plenty of women out here would love to have a ranch." Ethan gave a bitter laugh. "I am not marrying some woman I do not know just to check a box on a piece of paper." "Then you will lose the ranch," the judge said, putting the paper away. "Those are your only choices." As they turned to leave, the clerk, a nervous young man named Timothy, spoke up in a quiet voice. "Sir, there might be another way." Ethan's eyes narrowed on him. "What way is that?" The judge gave a short nod. "There is a woman who just came in from Philadelphia," Timothy explained. "Her name is Claire Whitfield. She is 26, not married, and looking for a new beginning." "Why would a woman from back east come all the way out here by herself?" Ethan asked, not trusting it. "Her reasons are her own," the judge cut in. "But if you are interested, you'd better move fast. In a small town, news gets around quick." They rode off, leaving Ethan with a choice that felt more like a cage. He stood on that porch for a long time, looking at the land he had poured his blood and sweat into. He had come here at 22, running from a past in Texas that taught him love was a weakness. His father had lost everything chasing dreams, and his mother had died from a broken heart and hard times. By 16, Ethan was on his own. Iron Creek was the one thing he believed could never be taken from him. Now, they were trying to do just that, unless he married a stranger. He went inside and poured a stiff whiskey. The idea of marriage felt wrong. It meant trust and depending on someone, the very things that had ruined his family. But losing the ranch was unthinkable. He drank the whiskey in one go. He would ride into town tomorrow and meet this Claire Whitfield. He would make whatever deal he had to. It did not have to be a real marriage. It just had to be legal. The town of Copper Springs was not much more than a dusty main street with a few buildings. Ethan arrived early to avoid gossip. He tied his horse outside Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. The owner, a tough woman in her 50s, opened the door. "Ethan Hale," she said, her eyes sizing him up. "I heard the judge paid you a visit." News sure traveled fast. "I am here to see Miss Claire Whitfield," Ethan said directly. Mrs. Henderson gave him a long look, then nodded. "Wait here." While he waited, he caught his reflection in the window. He looked older than his years, tired and worn down. "Mr. Hale." He turned around. The woman in the doorway was not what he had expected at all. Clara Whitfield was tall, with a quiet strength about her. Her dark hair was tied back neatly, and her gray-green eyes looked right at him without wavering. She wore a simple, well-made dress and stood with a stillness that was confident, not shy. She was not beautiful in the way most people meant, but there was something about her that you could not look away from. "Miss Whitfield," he said, suddenly feeling rough around the edges. "I am Ethan Hale. I was hoping we could talk." "I know who you are," she replied, her voice calm and clear. "We can speak in the parlor." She led him inside a small, tidy room. "I am here to see Clara Whitfield," Ethan said directly. "Word gets around fast in a small town." A woman studied him for a moment, then let him wait on the porch. His reflection showed a man who looked older than his years, tired and worn. Then the woman he came to see stood in the doorway. Clara Whitfield was not what he expected. She was tall, with a slender strength about her. Her dark hair was pulled back, and her gray-green eyes were sharp. She held herself with a quiet confidence. "Miss Whitfield," he said, suddenly feeling rough-edged. "I am Ethan Hale. My ranch is about 8 miles west of town. I was hoping we could speak privately." "I know who you are," she said, her voice educated but plain. "We can talk in the parlor." Inside, they sat across from each other. "I assume you know about the new settlement law," Ethan began. "I do," Clara confirmed. "Then you understand my situation," Ethan said, leaning forward. "I need to be direct, Miss Whitfield. I must marry someone within 30 days, or I will lose my ranch. I'm not looking for romance. I am proposing a legal arrangement." "I see," Clara said, her face giving nothing away. "And what would I receive in this arrangement?" The question caught him by surprise. "A home," he answered. "Security. The ranch house is large enough for us to have our own space. This would be a business arrangement, not a real marriage in that sense." "Business arrangements require clear terms," Clara stated. "What exactly are you offering, and what are you expecting in return?" "And after the law is satisfied?" Clara's voice was calm, but it had an edge. "Would you divorce me? Mr. Hale, I did not travel all the way from Philadelphia just to be a temporary solution to your problem." "Then why did you come here?" he asked, his tone harsher than he intended. Clara looked at him steadily. "I came because I have nothing left for me back east. At 26, I am considered too old for a good marriage proposal and too poor to be independent. I came to the Arizona territory because I hoped that out here, a woman could make her own way." Her frankness was disarming. "It does not matter here," he said quietly. "People care if you can work, not if you are married." "Then we have something in common," Clara said. "I can work, I can manage accounts and records. What I cannot do is be treated like a legal document." Ethan took a moment to truly see the woman before him. She was not desperate. She had standards. "What do you want?" he asked. "Honesty," Clara said. "I want to know that I will be treated with respect, not as a nuisance. And I want the option to leave with enough resources to start over if things become impossible." "That sounds like you are negotiating a business contract." "Is that not what this is?" she replied. He could not argue. "Fair enough. Come to the ranch. Spend 1 week there, no commitment. See if you can stand it, and me. If you can, we will go through with the ceremony. If you cannot, I will pay for your ticket to wherever you want to go." Clara considered it, then nodded. 1 week, but I have conditions. Separate sleeping quarters. Full access to the ranch's financial records. And I must be treated as a partner, not a servant. He had run his ranch alone for 6 years, but he would lose it all if he said no. "Done," he said, and they shook hands on the deal. As he rode home, Ethan felt unsettled. He had wanted a simple fix, but he had a feeling he had agreed to something much more complicated. Clara arrived the next morning, ready to work, with her bags and a trunk that seemed to be filled mostly with books. The ride to the ranch was quiet. Ethan pointed out the creek and the property lines. Clara listened, taking in every detail with a sharp gaze. When they finally saw the ranch, nestled in a valley, he watched her face. The house was solid and built to last. The barn and corrals stood behind it. It was a working ranch, plain and simple, a place that promised a hard life but an honest one. This whole place was his, down to the last fence post. He told Clara it was 640 acres, and he couldn't hide the pride in his voice. He ran 300 cattle and 20 horses with a little help come roundup time. The house was simple, just 4 rooms, and the well never ran dry. Clara looked around and said it was bigger and more remote than she'd imagined. Their nearest neighbor was 5 miles down the road. "That a problem?" he asked her. "No, Mr. Hale," she said, looking straight at him. "I'm used to being alone." Inside, the main room was plain, with a stone fireplace and a worn-out sofa. The kitchen had what it needed and nothing more. It was a man's house, clean but built for work, not comfort. Ethan pointed to one door and said, "That bedroom is mine." Then he opened another door. "This one's yours." As he went to get her trunk, Clara took a slow walk through the house, her eyes taking in every little detail. When he came back, she was in the kitchen staring at his sparse shelves. "When was the last time you had a real meal?" she asked. He got defensive, saying he ate just fine. She pulled down a near-empty flour sack and a can of beans. "Mr. Hale," she said, "this kitchen tells a story of 6 years of a man living alone. When did you last eat something that wasn't dried or out of a can?" Clara told him she would need to go to town for proper supplies if she was staying the week. "I need to see what's possible here," she told him, cutting off his argument. "Not just what you've gotten used to." He finally gave in. It was her week to make a decision after all. "Fine," he said. "Make your list. We'll go tomorrow." "Today would be better," she replied. Would be. So, just a few hours after they arrived, Ethan found himself headed back to town with a list Clara had written. At the general store, she moved with a purpose, gathering flour, sugar, eggs, and all sorts of vegetables. She even asked the owner, a fellow named Jacobson, what was freshest. Ethan started to complain about the cost. Clara just looked at him and said, "Food is an investment. A man with a full belly works better." Jacobson, who'd known Ethan for years, just grinned. "She's got you there, Hale," he chuckled. That evening, Clara cooked a meal that made Ethan's chest feel tight. It was roasted chicken, real mashed potatoes, and warm bread. He ate every bite without a word. It was the best thing he'd tasted in 10 years. When he finished, he mumbled a quiet, "Thank you." The house felt different with her in it, warmer somehow. For the first time in 6 years, it felt more like a home than just a shelter. And that feeling unsettled him. For the next 3 days, they fell into a routine. He'd get up before the sun to work the ranch, and she would have breakfast waiting for him when he came back. She scrubbed the whole house clean and even organized his chaotic kitchen. On the 4th day, he saw her out back, tilling the patch of dirt he'd meant to turn into a garden years ago. She was a hard worker, never once complaining about the heat or the tough soil. That evening, he walked in to find her at his table with his account book spread open. "Did I say you could look at those?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. She wasn't rattled one bit. "You said I could see the financial records." She pointed to a page. "Your bookkeeping is a mess, by the way. You are mixing your personal money with the ranch's." He crossed his arms and told her the ranch was making a profit. "Barely," she corrected him. "You're losing money because your records are poor, and I think someone might be stealing from you." She showed him an entry for feed. "You bought 200 pounds here, but your notes say you only used 120. Where did the rest of it go?" She pointed out the same thing with other supplies, small amounts, but they added up to almost $80 over 6 months. That was a whole month's pay for a ranch hand. "You figured all that out in one afternoon?" he asked, surprised. He should have been mad, but instead he pulled up a chair. "Show me," he said. For the next 2 hours, Clara explained his own business to him. She showed him how to track everything properly without ever making him feel foolish. "You will need to keep this up," she said when they were done. "Will you teach me?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. Clara looked him right in the eye. "That depends," she said, "on whether I am still here after this week." He remembered the trial period. He only had 3 days left. "So, what do you think so far?" he asked. She looked around the clean, organized room. "I think you have built something worth saving," she said slowly. "And I think you are more stubborn about accepting help than you ought to be. But," and he could hear the but coming, "I don't know if you truly want a partner, Mr. Hale, or if you just want someone to solve a problem. And there is a big difference between the two." Her words were too close to the bone. He had come to her for a legal fix, not to have his whole life examined. She was right, though. Something in his past taught him that leaning on folks only leads to getting hurt. So he built this ranch like a fortress around his heart. That truth stung something fierce. Ethan stood up so fast his chair screeched on the floorboards. "I'm going to check on the horses," he mumbled, and escaped into the cool night air before she could say more. Under a sky full of stars, he leaned on the corral fence, the turmoil in his chest slowly settling as his horse Chance nudged his hand. He had spent years believing that being alone was just plain smart, a lesson learned the hard way. When he finally headed back inside, a line of light from under Clara's door showed she was still awake. He lay in his own bed, listening to the old house settle, and for the first time in a long while, he did not feel so alone. A few days later, Clara asked to ride out with him. He expected her to need help, but she swung onto that mare like she was born in a saddle. "I spent my summers on my granddaddy's farm," she said, seeing his surprise. She quietly watched the herd for a good 20 minutes, then said, "You are short about 15 head." Ethan's head snapped around. "You counted them just like that?" he asked, stunned. "I got a good eye for it," she replied. "You are either missing cattle or your first count was wrong." And he knew his spring count had been right on the money. That meant Clara was right. "Rustlers," he said, the word tasting like rust in his mouth. They rode the fence line, and it was Clara who spotted it first. A section of wire had been cut clean through and patched up with new wire that stuck out like a sore thumb. "Someone has been on your land," she said, getting down for a closer look. "And it was recent. Fury started to build in Ethan's gut. "This could be someone who knows your ways," Clara added, looking him straight in the eye. "Someone who knows when you make your rounds." "You think it is one of my own men?" he asked. She just looked at him, and he knew it was a real possibility. He hired whoever was willing to work, never thinking to question their character. "I do not know," he admitted, and the words felt like a failure. That evening, Clara laid out a whole new system for tracking his livestock and checking fences. "From now on, you check a different part of the fence every day," she instructed. "Keep 'em guessing. If there is a pattern to this mess, we will find it." "We?" Ethan asked. Clara met his gaze. "If I agree to this marriage, Mr. Hale, your problems become my problems." It was the closest she had come to saying she would stay. "2 more days," he said. "Then we both decide," she corrected him. "This has to work for the both of us." He realized then that he had to choose this too. He had to choose to trust someone again. And as he lay in bed that night, he admitted to himself that he truly did not want her to leave. He found her on the porch the next day, an old Colt revolver laid out in pieces on a cloth. "It's a fine weapon," she said, cleaning each part with a practiced hand. "A rifle is good from far off, but not much help if someone gets too close." Ethan just watched, amazed. "Do you know how to use that thing?" "My granddaddy taught me," she said, snapping the gun back together with a satisfying click. He believed a woman should know how to defend her home. She loaded the revolver, walked out past the barn, and with a steady hand, she put a round clean through a distant fence post. Ethan just stood there, realizing Clara Whitfield was full of more surprises than a whole summer of thunderstorms. About 20 yards off. "Show me," he said. She stood her ground, aimed, and fired 3 quick shots. All 3 hit the post in a tight group. Ethan couldn't hide his surprise. "Your grandfather taught you, right?" Clara reloaded the pistol. "I may have been in Philadelphia for 8 years, Mr. Hale, but I remember how to survive out here." Later, as the sun went down, they sat on the porch. Tomorrow was the 7th day, when she had to decide. "I've been thinking on your offer," Clara said. Ethan's heart pounded, but his voice stayed calm. "And your terms are not enough," she continued. "If I am to be your wife, I need more than a separate room. I need to be a true partner. I want my name on the deed as a co-owner, and I need to know I won't be tossed out if something happens to you." Her requests were fair, but they meant he would have to give up total control. "That's a whole lot to ask," he said slowly. "It's a lot to give," Clara shot back. "I'm tying my future to you and this land. I am giving up my old life completely. Partnership and security seem like a fair trade. And if I refuse?" For a long moment, Clara was silent. "Then I will thank you for your kindness, take the stagecoach fare, and be gone in the morning. That will leave you 23 days to find another way." "And if I agree?" "Then tomorrow we file the deed and we get married on the 30th day," she stated, looking him straight in the eye. "But understand me, Ethan. I won't be a wife who is hidden away. We do this as real partners. That means respect and shared decisions. This ranch will belong to us both. His name on a deed, shared. His choices, shared. His life, tied to a woman who could leave him. His father always said depending on others was for fools. But in just 6 days, she had found his lost cattle, fixed his accounting books, and improved his home. What might she accomplish in 6 years? He also knew he'd slept better this past week than he had in years. The house felt less empty with her in it. He found himself listening for her footsteps. He realized that maybe being alone was not the same thing as being strong. Just before midnight, Ethan made up his mind. He knocked on Clara's door. She was sitting up in bed, waiting. "Yes," he said, "to all of it. Partnership, co-ownership, everything. But on one condition." "What condition?" Clara asked. "That you give me time," Ethan said. "Time to learn how to be a partner. I am not used to it. I will make mistakes. But I will try. Just give me the time to learn." Clara looked at his face for a long time. Then she gave him the first real smile he had ever seen from her. "That is the most honest thing you have said to me," she told him. "Yes, Ethan, I will give you time. And you will do the same for me." "We will go to town tomorrow," Ethan said. "File the papers." He reached for her hand, and she took it. "Partners," he said. "Partners," Clara agreed. For the first time, Ethan believed that partnership didn't mean weakness. It might just mean strength. The next morning, they rode the wagon into Copper Springs to file the deed. The air was already hot. The land office smelled of dust and old paper. A tired clerk named Morrison pushed the forms across the counter without a word. He'd seen these kinds of arrangements before. "You both sign here," Morrison instructed. "Miss Whitfield, you understand this makes you a legal partner as of today. Mr. Hale, you know you are giving up sole ownership." Ethan paused for a second, then looked at Clara. He saw she felt the same mix of hope and worry that he did. "I understand." They both signed their names. Just like that, the Iron Creek Ranch belonged to both of them. Outside in the bright sun, Clara tucked her copy of the deed away. "No turning back now," she said. "No," Ethan replied. "No turning back." They stopped next at the office of Reverend Calloway to set the date. "The 30th of the month," Ethan told him. "A simple wedding." The Reverend nodded. "I have married 17 couples out here," he said. "The practical ones often do the best. Sometimes they even surprise everyone and become something more. We're just aiming for legal and fair," Ethan said. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. When they reached the edge of their property, Clara asked him to stop the wagon. She got down and looked out over the land. It now belonged to her just as much as it did to him. "My granddaddy used to say this land has a memory," Clara said, the wind pulling strands from her braid. He believed it knew who bled for it and who was just passing through. Ethan stood beside her, looking over the sprawling Arizona ranch that was now half his, half hers. "What do you suppose it remembers about us?" "It remembers 6 years of one man's grit," she answered. "Now, it has to learn to remember a partnership." She turned to him, a woman he barely knew, now tied to him by a piece of paper. "This whole arrangement is a gamble, and if folks knew how unprepared we are, they would call us fools. But sometimes a little foolish faith is all you have." "I told you I am going to be terrible at this," Ethan said plainly. "Well, I have been told I am too stubborn for my own good," Clara admitted with a slight smile. "So I reckon we are starting on even ground. That is more than most folks get." They climbed back on the wagon, a silent understanding passing between them. The days that followed settled into a new kind of rhythm. Clara was no longer a guest, but a partner, making small, sensible changes around the house that made life easier. She claimed a corner for the ranch accounts and made the place feel more like a home. Ethan, in turn, started including her in decisions he used to make alone. He would tell her his plans for the day or ask her opinion on which supplies they needed most. At first, it felt unnatural to him, this need to explain himself after 6 years of answering to no one. But Clara never used her new position as a weapon. She offered her thoughts but respected his experience. When they disagreed, they talked it through, looking for a solution instead of a victory. Their first real argument happened 3 days after they filed the deed. Ethan hired 2 seasonal hands he trusted, Tom Fletcher and Jim Dawson, to help with some major fence repairs. He did not tell Clara until she saw the note about their wages in the account book that evening. "You hired Tom Fletcher," she said, her voice carefully level. "He is a good worker," Ethan replied. "We need the help." She slid a different ledger across the table, pointing to a page. "He was here last spring. And according to your own notes, that is right when feed, salt licks, and medical supplies went missing. The same things I pointed out to you last week." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. "You think Tom is a thief?" "I think the timing is mighty suspicious." "I trust my judgment of character," Ethan stated flatly. "Your judgment that missed $80 in losses over 6 months?" The truth of her words was a sharp sting. He stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "I have run this ranch by myself for 6 years. And now it belongs to both of us," Clara said, standing to meet his gaze. If Tom is stealing, he is stealing from me, too. This is not about control, Ethan. It is about common sense. She gathered her books and walked to her room, closing the door with a quiet click that felt worse than a slam. Ethan stood alone, shame and anger wrestling inside him. He knew she was right, and his pride was the only thing stopping him from admitting it. He slept poorly that night, bothered by the silence from her room. The next morning, the air was thick with unspoken words. "I am riding out to check the south pasture fence," he said stiffly. "I will come with you," Clara replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. They rode in a tense quiet, the sky threatening rain. Ethan focused on the fence, checking every post and wire, aware of her presence beside him. It was Clara who spotted it first. Another section of fence had been cleanly cut and then poorly repaired, just like the one they found before. Ethan dismounted, his heart sinking. The signs were clear. Several cattle had been driven through. Fresh tracks led southeast toward the rough country where they could be hidden. "At least 10 head," Clara said, examining the hoofprints. 2, maybe 3 riders. A cold fury washed over Ethan. This was not random. Whoever was doing this knew his land and his routines. "We have to track them," he said. "We have to report them," Clara countered firmly. "This is a job for the marshal. Charging after armed thieves is how you get killed." He wanted to argue, to insist they could handle it themselves, but he was tired of fighting just to prove he was in charge. He knew she was right. Again. "Fine," he agreed. They fixed the fence, then turned their horses back. But instead of heading for town, Ethan steered them toward an old line shack on the far edge of the property. Clara followed him into the line shack where supplies were kept. "What are we looking for?" she asked. "To see if I'm right," Ethan said grimly. The shelves told the story. A good knife, 2 coils of rope, and his wire cutters were gone. "Someone's been in here," he stated, though they both knew it. And they knew exactly where to look. The name hung in the air between them. Tom Fletcher. A man he'd hired, a man he'd trusted. The weight of that betrayal felt heavy as lead. Ethan sank onto a bench. "You tried to warn me." Clara sat near him. "There's no satisfaction in being right about a thing like this." Ethan stared at his hands. "I paid him a fair wage 3 different times, trusted him completely." Her voice was kind. "Ethan, trusting folks isn't foolish. The man who breaks that trust is the one in the wrong. That's on him, not you." He'd expected a lecture, not comfort. The simple kindness almost broke him. "I'm sorry," he said, finally looking at her. "For last night, I should have listened." She offered a small smile. "I could have been gentler." They agreed then and there. They would make mistakes, but they'd learn from them together. In town, they told the story to Marshal Davies, a lawman who'd seen it all in his 2 decades of service. Davies listened, promising to put a tracking party together. "Tom Fletcher, you say," he grumbled. "That name has come up before. I'll see what I can find." Back at the ranch, a comfortable quiet settled between them. For the first time, Ethan felt like he had a true partner, someone to share the burden. The problems felt smaller when they were faced together. That evening on the porch, as the sun bled out across the hills, Clara spoke. "My father died when I was 14, she said softly. My mother remarried a man who wanted nothing to do with me. I was sent away to relatives who made it clear I was just a mouth to feed." Ethan listened, knowing she was giving him a piece of her past. "I worked as a teacher for 6 years, she went on, saved every dime I could. But a woman with ideas was not welcome there. My uncle told me to find a husband or find the door, so I used my savings and came out here." "You came for a new start," Ethan said. "I came for independence," she corrected. "I never expected to be a rancher." "Any regrets?" he asked. She looked at him, the last light of day in her eyes. "Ask me again in a year. After we've faced a winter and a real crisis. Then I will know for sure." A few days later, Marshal Davies returned. He had found 9 of the stolen cattle down in a canyon 20 miles south, but the thieves were long gone. Tom Fletcher, he said, had vanished completely, a clear sign of guilt. "We will keep an eye out," the marshal promised, "but you best hire some hands you can trust." But finding reliable help was proving to be a challenge. Word of their coming wedding was all over Copper Springs, and the town gossip was ugly. In the saloon, Ethan overheard men making crude jokes, wondering why some woman from back east would marry a rancher she barely knew. He'd never paid mind to gossip, but hearing them talk about Clara that way made his blood boil. She deserved respect. As they loaded their wagon, Clara saw the anger on his face. "Let them talk," she said quietly. "It is just what small-minded people do." "It matters to me," he insisted. She stopped and looked at him. Why? The question stopped him cold. It was because she was no longer just a business partner. He respected her, and he cared what people thought. "Because you deserve to be treated with respect," he finally answered. "What we are building here is better than their cheap talk." Her expression softened. "Thank you, Ethan. But we know the truth. That has to be enough." He knew she was right, but the anger didn't just disappear. Riding home, he realized their arrangement had become something more than practical. They had a partnership, friendship, and respect. A week before the wedding, the summer storms rolled in hard. Thunder shook the prairie and lightning cracked open the sky. Rain came down in sheets, turning the whole world to mud. Ethan rode out in the downpour to check on the cattle, while Clara stayed back, dealing with a leaking roof in the kitchen. When the big storm finally broke, she was ready. She had pots and pans catching every drip from the leaky roof. When he came inside, soaked to the bone, she had dry clothes and hot coffee waiting. "The leak is patched for now," she told him. These small kindnesses were chipping away at his defenses. "You do not have to do all this," he said. "I know," she replied, stirring a pot of stew. "But partners take care of each other. You were out there saving our cattle. The least I can do is keep you from catching a cold." "Our cattle," he repeated softly. The word felt different now, less like a burden and more like a promise. That night, as the wind howled, a quiet knock came on his bedroom door. "Clara," he called out. She stood in her nightgown, her hair in a single braid, looking uncertain in a way he had never seen. "I am sorry to bother you," she said, "but water is coming through my ceiling." Ethan was on his feet in an instant. In Clara's room, a steady drip was soaking the rug. He grabbed a bucket. "You cannot sleep in here tonight." "I will take the sofa," she offered. "You will sleep in my room," Ethan stated firmly. "It is dry and the bed is bigger. This is not a debate." He gathered her books and personal items. "Come on." As she followed him, she stopped to speak. "Ethan, thank you. For the partnership, for the respect." He turned back to her. "You do not need to thank me for treating you as an equal. That is just basic decency. You would be surprised how rare decency is," she said quietly. "Good night." Lying on that hard sofa, Ethan realized something had shifted. Clara was safe in his bed, and instead of feeling trapped, he felt protective. Morning came and the storm had passed. The roof, however, was in a bad way. The whole eastern section needed work that would take days and a trip to town for supplies. "I will come with you," Clara said. "We can measure it all together so you get exactly what you need." They spent the morning on that roof, working side by side. She was not afraid of the height or the heat, just a steady partner. When they climbed down, he found himself studying her. She moved around the ranch with a new confidence, no longer asking permission, but acting as a true equal. "What?" she asked, catching his gaze. "Nothing," he said. "Just thinking that in 4 days we will be married and I still barely know you." Clara smiled. "What do you want to know?" "What is your favorite book?" The question seemed to surprise her. "Jane Eyre. Because the heroine is independent and has her own opinions," he guessed. "Exactly," she laughed. "What about you?" "What is something I do not know?" Ethan thought for a moment. "I can play the harmonica." Taught myself one winter when I was snowed in for 3 weeks. I would like to hear it sometime. Maybe. They fell into an easy rhythm, sharing small pieces of their lives. Clara had wanted to be a doctor. Ethan had once set his own broken arm. They were building a foundation of understanding, one story at a time. On the last evening before their wedding, Ethan found Clara on the porch watching the sunset. He sat beside her in a comfortable silence. "Are you afraid?" she asked suddenly. "Of tomorrow?" He decided to be honest. "Yes. I am afraid I will not be good enough at this, that I will fail you somehow." Clara reached over and took his hand. "I am afraid, too. Afraid that my independence will be the thing that drives you away. Afraid this legal arrangement will not be enough to hold us together." "So we are both terrified," Ethan said, squeezing her hand. "Good. At least we are terrified together." Her laugh eased something in his chest. He realized then they had already made the promises that mattered. The rest was just paperwork. The wedding itself took 15 minutes in the Reverend's small office. Clara wore a simple dress of dove gray she had sewn herself. Ethan had put on his only suit. The words were standard. But when Ethan took Clara's hand to speak his vows, he meant them more than he had expected. This was not just for convenience anymore. This was a choice. When they were pronounced husband and wife, they did not kiss. He simply squeezed her hand and she squeezed back. That felt more real. As he stood there, Ethan felt something he had not felt in 10 years. It was hope. Hope that he might not have to face the world alone after all. Hope that this woman could become his true partner. After a small celebration in town, they rode back to the ranch. "Well," Clara said. "We did it." "We did," Ethan agreed. He looked at his new wife, searching for the right words. "It should feel different, I guess." "Does it?" He considered it. "No and yes. We are the same people, but the promises are real now, legal." "The marriage gives us security," Clara corrected gently. "But the partnership is what we make of it every day." At the house, everything was the same, yet everything had changed. The dinner between them was filled with unspoken questions. They shared a name and property, but still had separate rooms. "I have been thinking," Clara said, setting down her fork, "about the sleeping arrangements. The leak in my room is fixed. The ceiling is sound now. I should move back to my own room." She paused, her gaze steady on his. "Unless you would prefer otherwise." The question hung in the air between them. Their arrangement had never been normal. "What would you prefer?" he asked, turning the question back to her. "I asked you first," she said softly. He gave her his full attention. "The honest answer is I do not know. Part of me thinks we should maintain our clear boundaries. But another part of me remembers the night of the storm. Knowing you were safe in my room felt right in a way I cannot explain." Clara's expression softened. "I felt the same way. Safe. Maybe our separate rooms were more about fear than anything else." "Fear of what?" "Of this becoming more than just a practical arrangement," she said. "I'm not suggesting we change everything tonight. But I am suggesting that maybe we can stop treating each other like business associates who just happen to share a house." "What does that look like?" Clara met his gaze across the table. "Maybe we find out together. We could stop acting like these past 3 weeks have been more than just business. We're both scared, but maybe it is time to be brave." He saw the strength and the fear in her eyes. This woman had somehow broken through all his walls. "I care about you," he admitted quietly, "more than I should. That scares me half to death. Everyone I have ever cared for has left." "Well, I am not going anywhere," she said, her voice firm. "This is my home now. I do not run." She offered her hand. "I cannot promise it will be easy, but I can promise I will fight for us." "Can you?" He took her hand. "Yes," he said, "I can. Then let us stop acting like strangers in our own home. Let us share a room, even if we only sleep." This stopped being business a long time ago. A part of him that had been broken for years started to feel whole. Okay, he breathed. That night was as awkward as a first dance. When she knocked on his door, he felt his heart pound. I can still sleep in the other room, she offered. I do not want you to, he said, pulling back the covers. No pressure. She got into bed, keeping a careful distance. He turned out the lamp and lay beside her, aware of her warmth just 2 feet away. Ethan? She whispered. Thank you for making me feel safe. He smiled in the dark. Thank you for being brave enough to ask. Soon, her breathing evened out into sleep. A deep peace settled over him. It felt like a missing piece had finally found its place. He slept better that night than he had in a very long time. Their new life settled into a rhythm. They worked and ate together, and at night they talked for hours. The space between them in the bed slowly disappeared. One night, he woke to find her curled up against him for warmth. He put his arm around her, and it just felt right. The ranch started thriving. They hired 2 good hands, Miguel and John, and together they fixed up the place. Clara's smarts turned everything around. She organized schedules and tracked every penny, proving they could even expand. Soon, Ethan was asking for her advice on everything. We need more help for the winter, she said one evening, looking over the books. We can afford it now that things are being run properly. Most hands head south for the winter, Ethan argued. Then we will offer them something better, she replied. A warm place to sleep and fair pay. You would be surprised. As always, she was right. Their success got people talking, though. Some folks did not like a woman from back east having so much say. One night in the saloon, Ethan overheard a rancher named Ben Morrison making ugly jokes about Clara. Something inside Ethan broke loose. Say that again, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Morrison, full of whiskey, sneered. I said your wife runs your life, Hale. Ethan's fist hit Morrison's jaw before he even thought about it. The man dropped like a sack of feed. Ethan stood over him, seething. My wife is twice the rancher you will ever be. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me. That is your problem, not hers. Marshal Davies showed up, yanking Ethan back before things got worse. That is enough from both of you. Morrison, go sleep it off. Ethan, you get on home before you do something that lands you in a jail cell. Ethan rode back to the ranch, his knuckles bleeding and his blood still boiling. Clara was right there on the porch, and one look at his face told her the whole story. What happened? Ben Morrison had some thoughts about our marriage. I helped him rearrange his face. Ethan. Her voice was a mix of frustration and maybe a little affection. You cannot just punch everyone who gossips about us. I can sure try, he mumbled. Clara took his hand, looking at the split skin. Come on inside. Let me get this cleaned up. In the kitchen, she bandaged his hand with a gentle touch. Ethan just watched her, taking in the careful way she worked. I can handle talk, she said softly. It matters to me, Ethan said. It matters that they give you the respect you deserve. Clara looked him square in the eye. Why? Because you are my wife, he said, the words feeling heavier than he expected. Because what we have here is real, and I will not let anyone tear it down. Ethan, are we still going to pretend this is just a business deal? The question just hung there in the quiet room. Ethan thought about the last 2 months, waking up next to her, working beside her, and how the house felt empty when she was gone. No, he said finally, we are not pretending anymore. A soft look came over Clara's face. Good, because I stopped pretending a long time ago. She leaned in and he met her halfway in a kiss that felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said, the words feeling both scary and right. I do not know how it happened, but it did. I love you too, Clara whispered back. They ended up in the bedroom, finally making their marriage about more than just a piece of paper. Lying there in the dark, Ethan admitted, I was so scared of this, of needing somebody this much. This is not weakness, Clara said, tracing a pattern on his chest. This right here is the bravest thing either of us has ever done. Choosing to trust, choosing to love. There is no turning back now, Ethan said, pulling her closer, not for anything in this world. Then word came from the marshal that Tom Fletcher and his crew were back, stealing cattle south of Iron Creek. "We need to double the patrols," Clara said, pointing at a map of their land. "We will set up a watch rotation at night." "That is a hard ride, keeping someone up all night." "Every night," Ethan warned. "It will not be for long," she reasoned. "Winter is coming. If we can hold out for another month, Fletcher will move on to easier pickings." So Ethan, Miguel, and John started taking turns on the night watch. It was bone-tiring work, but after 2 weeks, things were quiet. They started to think they were safe. That is right, when Fletcher made his move. On a moonless night, Ethan was on watch when he heard it, the sound of cattle being pushed hard. He spurred his horse toward the noise, his rifle already in his hands. He could just make out the shapes in the dark. 3 riders pushing a dozen of his cattle toward a break in the fence. He recognized Tom Fletcher's outline against the sky. "That is far enough," Ethan yelled. "Let the cattle go!" The only answer he got was a gunshot that whistled past his ear. Ethan dove off his horse and fired back from behind cover. The cattle scattered, and the riders returned fire as they pulled back. Back at the house, Clara heard the gunshots, and her blood ran cold. She grabbed her revolver and ran for the barn. "Miguel, John!" "They are shooting at the east fence line. Ethan is out there by himself." They saddled their horses faster than ever. Clara led the way, riding recklessly in the dark. The thought of losing Ethan now was too much to bear. She found him pinned down behind some rocks, trading shots with 2 men while a third tried to circle around him. Clara did not think twice. She raised her revolver and fired a shot into the dirt right in front of the third man's horse. The horse bucked hard, throwing its rider to the ground. The other 2, now seeing they were outnumbered, turned tail and vanished into the night. Miguel caught the fellow who got thrown from his horse. "Do not move," he ordered. Clara ran straight to Ethan, who was getting to his feet, covered in dust and bleeding from a graze on his shoulder. But he was alive. "I am all right," he said, holding her tight. "What are you doing out here? You should have stayed where it was safe." "Safe?" Clara's fear turned to anger. "While you are out here getting shot at? Ethan Hale, we are partners. I do not sit at home while you risk your life alone. I know you can handle it," she cut him off, her voice fierce. "But you do not have to do it alone anymore. You are not alone." Ethan just stared at the woman who had ridden straight into a gunfight for him, and something inside him finally understood what real strength was. "You are right," he said quietly. "I am sorry." The captured rider spilled everything. He was a young kid who told them all about Fletcher's operation. Marshal Davies came at sunrise to pick up the prisoner. "You folks did good work," he told them. "Fletcher will hear his man talked. He will not be back." After the marshal left, they stood together watching the sun come up over their land. The cattle were safe, and the fence could be fixed. They had made it through. "I thought I was going to lose you," Clara said softly. "I know," Ethan said, pulling her in. "I thought the same thing when I saw you riding toward the guns. You could have been killed." "So could you," she said, turning to face him. "I meant what I said, Ethan. We are partners in everything, the business, the danger, all of it. I cannot be the kind of wife who just stays behind. That is not me." "I'm starting to understand that," Ethan said. He had spent his whole life thinking that relying on someone was a weakness. Now, holding Clara, he knew it was the only real strength in the world. He used to think needing someone was a weakness, that it was just plain dangerous. But with Clara there, he knew he was not alone, and that did not make him weak. It made him stronger. "It made us stronger," she corrected him. Ethan had to agree. As the ranch stirred to life around them, they walked back to the house, hand in hand. The men were already out, tending to the herd and fixing the broken fence line. Life just kept rolling on. That evening, watching the sunset, Ethan knew something that would have scared him half to death 6 months ago. He had fought to save this ranch, but it was not the land he almost died for last night. It was Clara. What they were both protecting was each other. It was the home they had built, not out of wood and stone, but out of trust and being brave enough to lean on one another. The judge said marry or lose the land. He married for the ranch, but somewhere along the way, Clara became everything. "What is on your mind?" Clara asked him softly. "That the judge was right," Ethan said. "He told me I needed a family household. I figured that just meant signing some papers." He took her hand. But what he really meant was this: finding someone to build a life with, to share the good and the bad. Her eyes sparkled in the dim light. "So you are glad the law made you marry me?" "I'm just grateful for whatever brought you to my door that day," Ethan said, "because it brought me you. And you are the best thing that ever happened to this stubborn man. Even when you ride into a fight you ought to stay out of." He pulled her in close. "You own my heart, Clara. Completely." "Good," she whispered against his chest. "Because you have mine, and I'm not asking for it back." They sat together in the growing dark, two strangers who had become partners, who had found their forever. The ranch was safe, proof of what they had built. But Ethan knew the real victory was not the land. The real victory was Clara. She had walked right into his guarded life, and instead of tearing it down, she made him open the gates. She showed him love was not a weakness, but the greatest strength a man could find. In doing that, she had saved more than just his ranch. She had saved him. Winter came to Iron Creek, beautiful and brutal. Snow blanketed everything, and the cold bit deep. The cattle huddled in the valleys, and the horses wore their thick winter coats. But Clara blossomed in the cold. She knew how to prepare, stocking the pantry and keeping a warm fire burning, making the house a true haven. Ethan watched her, feeling a deep sense of peace he had never known. She moved with a quiet confidence, making their house a home. She made the long, dark evenings something to look forward to. They would talk for hours, or just sit in a comfortable silence that only two people truly at ease can share. But deep down, something old and scared in Ethan was stirring. The very happiness he found with Clara, the love he felt for her, terrified a part of him that had always used walls to stay safe. Every day he woke up next to her, and every day that fear grew. What if she left? What if he was not enough? He knew it made no sense. Clara had proven herself time and again. But old fears do not listen to reason, and the wounds from his father's failures and his mother's death ran deep. So he started pulling back just a little. He spent more time out on the range and made choices without talking to her first. He built a little distance, a little wall, just in case. And of course Clara noticed. "You have been quiet," she said one night, closing the account books. "Just tired," he answered. But it was not the whole truth. "Ethan, talk to me," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Do not shut me out," she said. "We promised to be honest." He remembered the promise. That was the problem. Promises get broken. "I do not want to burden you," he said. "With what?" "With the fact that I am terrified every single day," he finally admitted. "Terrified that I will wake up and all this will be gone. That you will see you deserve better and just leave." "So you are pushing me away," she said softly, "to protect yourself from a pain that has not even happened." He could only nod. She crossed the room and her eyes were full of understanding, not anger. "I am not going anywhere, Ethan. I choose you, every single day. It is not because life is easy, but because you are worth it." "People say that until they do not," he said, the old bitterness in his voice. "My father gave up. My mother died. Everyone leaves, Clara." She took his hands. "Then let me be the first one who does not. I know you are scared. I get scared too. But shutting me out does not protect you from loss. It just makes sure you are alone, even when I am standing right here." Her words hit him like a physical blow, the simple truth of them clearing away the fear. He realized he was so worried about getting hurt later that he was causing pain right now. He was picking lonely over love because it felt safer. "I do not know how to stop being scared," he confessed. "I am not asking you to stop," she said, her grip tight on his hands. "I am asking you to be scared and choose us anyway, but I cannot be the only one fighting for this marriage." She was right. "I will try," he promised. And he did try. But the fear was always there, a little voice telling him it was all going to end. Then in February, a big storm started brewing. Miguel, who knew these parts well, got a worried look on his face as he watched the sky. "A bad one is coming," he warned. The kind that buries barns and freezes cattle solid. We need to get ready. For 2 days they worked without stopping, moving herds to sheltered valleys and reinforcing buildings. Clara managed the supplies for the house, making sure they could last for weeks. "This feels like a lot," Ethan commented. "It is better to have too much than not enough," she answered. "Miguel is worried, and that man does not spook easy." She was right. The storm hit that Tuesday with a fury that stunned everyone. The wind howled, and the snow came down so thick you could not see your hand in front of your face. Ethan, Clara, and their 5 hands huddled in the house while the blizzard raged for 3 solid days. Snow drifted up past the windows. All they could do was wait it out together. For 4 days, the blizzard howled like a banshee, trapping Ethan and Clara inside. When the wind finally quit, the silence was deafening. Ethan swung the door open to a world buried in white. Drift stood over 10 feet tall. He said, "I need to go check on the cattle." Clara stood firm. "It is still dangerously cold out there, Ethan. Let us wait." "The herd cannot wait," he shot back. "If any are trapped, we lose them by the hour." "Then send the men," she pleaded. "You do not have to go yourself. It is my ranch," he said, his voice hard. "It is our ranch," Clara corrected him, her patience wearing thin. "Going out there alone is just plain foolish." Ethan was already pulling on his heaviest coat, his mind set. He couldn't stand being warm inside while his livelihood was at risk. "I will take Miguel," he offered, a compromise that pleased no one. "Please, Ethan, just one more day." "It is not a needless risk," he said, pulling away from her. "It is the job." He left without a backwards glance, because he knew he would see the fear in her eyes. He was closing himself off again, choosing his old habit of handling things alone over their partnership. Out in the biting cold, he and Miguel found the cattle had fared better than expected. Most of the herd was fine. As the sun started to dip low, Miguel spoke up. "We ought to head back now. The temperature is dropping fast." Ethan shook his head. "Just one more pasture. We need to go now, Ethan. It is getting dark." "You go on," Ethan told him. "I will check the north section and catch up." Miguel looked at him, his face grim. "I am not leaving you out here alone. We ride back together." "I do not need a babysitter, Miguel." Miguel finally snapped. "No, you need a partner, but you keep pushing yours away." "Your wife is at home, worried sick, and you are out here risking your neck. What are you trying to prove?" The question struck Ethan right in the heart. He had no answer. He was trying to prove he did not need anyone, that leaning on Clara was some kind of weakness. "Fine," he finally muttered. "We will go back." But they had waited too long. The cold had sunk its teeth into them deep. Ethan started to feel a dangerous numbness in his hands and feet. He fell from his horse, and the second time he could not find the strength to get back up. "Go on, get help," he mumbled to Miguel. "I am not leaving you," Miguel said, trying to lift him. But Ethan was a dead weight. The world was turning soft and white. It seemed so easy to just close his eyes. Then he thought of Clara, waiting for him back at the house. He thought of how he had pushed her away, all because he was too afraid to admit how much he needed her. He had been a stubborn fool. "Clara," he tried to say, "tell Clara." But the cold finally took him, and everything went black. Back at the ranch, Clara stared out the window into the darkness. The sun had set an hour ago. "They are still out there," she said to the ranch hand. "John, we have to find them." "In this cold, we would just get lost," John said gently. "They are tough men. They will find shelter." "Or they are already gone," Clara said, her voice hollow. "Saddle the horses. We are going." She would not take no for an answer. She was going to find her husband. They rode out with lanterns, calling names into the wind. It was John who found Miguel's horse wandering alone. 100 yards away, they found the 2 men in a snowdrift. Miguel was barely conscious. Ethan was like a man made of ice. Clara refused to panic. She gave orders with a steady voice. John would get Miguel back to the house at once. She would stay with Ethan. "I am not leaving my husband," she said, her tone like steel. "Get Miguel home, then come back with blankets. Now move." After they left, she pulled Ethan's body close, wrapping her own coat around them both. She rubbed his frozen hands, using her own warmth to fight the cold, talking to him the whole time. "You do not get to die out here, Ethan Hale. Do you hear me? You promised. You have to fight to come back to me." His skin was so cold it felt brittle. She fought back her terror and kept working. When the men returned, they carefully loaded Ethan onto a makeshift sled. Clara rode beside him all the way back, her eyes never leaving his face, praying for a sign of life, a sign that she had not already lost him forever. With heated stones wrapped in old cloths, Clara covered him with every single blanket they owned. She was in a desperate fight to bring his body temperature back from the edge. Miguel, finally looking like himself again, came to check on them. "How is he even alive?" Clara said, stating the only thing she knew for sure. "His heart is still beating." Miguel looked down. "This is my fault. I should have insisted we turn back." Clara's voice was hard, a mix of anger and pure terror. "This is Ethan's fault. He's the one who chose cattle over his own safety. You tried to stop him." She sat beside the bed, holding Ethan's icy hand and just waiting. The long hours crept by, but he never woke up. "You promised me you would fight for us," she whispered to his still body. "But you ran. You chose what was familiar over what we built. And now you are here, maybe dying. And I cannot even tell you how angry you have made me." Her voice finally broke, and the tears she had held back all night began to fall. She did not even notice his hand move just a little, barely touching her hair. "Clara." The word was a weak whisper, but it made her head snap up. Ethan's eyes were open, not quite focused, but he was aware. "You are awake," she breathed out. "Oh, thank everything. You are awake." "Miguel," he managed to say. "He is fine. Recovered hours ago." Her hand held his tighter. "You nearly died, Ethan. You were so cold for so long. I really thought I had lost you." "I am sorry," he said, and she could see how much the words cost him. "So sorry. You were right about everything." "We will talk about that when you are stronger," Clara said, her voice fierce. But Ethan's grip tightened as if he feared she would leave. "No, I need to say this now. I was so afraid of losing you that I pushed you away. I kept my walls up and made choices all by myself, all the things I promised not to do." And when he thought he was dying out in that storm, all he could think about was how stupid he had been, wasting time being afraid instead of loving her. "But you survived," Clara said, her own tears now streaming down her face. "You are here, you are alive, and we get another chance." "I do not deserve another chance." "That is not your decision to make," Clara's voice was firm. "I am choosing to give you one. But Ethan, this is the very last time. I cannot spend our marriage wondering when you will pull away again. If we are going to survive this, you have to commit all the way. No more walls, no more running." Ethan's eyes were bright with his own tears. "I know. And I will, I promise. I will spend the rest of my life proving that I choose you, that I trust you." "You do not have to stop being afraid," Clara said, her voice softening. "You just have to be afraid and choose me anyway." "I do," Ethan said. "I choose you today, tomorrow, and every day I have left. I choose you, Clara, always." She leaned down and kissed him, gentle and careful. "Rest now," she said. "When you are well, we are going to have a very long conversation." Despite it all, he smiled, looking forward to it. He finally slept, and Clara let herself believe he would make it. She stayed right there holding his hand, choosing to forgive him even though the anger and fear were still sharp. That is what love was. It meant choosing each other in the hard moments, not just the easy ones. Ethan had nearly died because he was afraid to be vulnerable. But in surviving, he learned the lesson that had been just out of his reach for so long. Love was not the danger. Fear was. And the only cure for that fear was the courage to love completely, with no reservations. It would take time for him to heal, but Clara would be there for all of it. She had chosen Ethan, a stubborn and afraid man who was learning how to love. That was what partnership meant. And she had enough strength for the both of them until Ethan could find his own again. For 5 long days, Ethan was helpless, and the silence in that house was louder than a winter storm. His wife, Clara, took care of him, but her touch was firm and her words were few. You could feel the anger rolling off her like heat from dry ground. She brought his meals and changed his bandages, but the warmth between them was gone. On the 5th day, when he could finally sit up on his own, she set his breakfast down with a hard clatter. "We need to talk," she said. Clara looked at him, her hands clenched tight in her lap. "You nearly died, Ethan. You almost made me a widow because you were too proud to listen. I begged you to wait, but you rode out into that blizzard anyway." Her voice started to shake. "Do you have any idea what that was like? Searching in the dark, praying I would find you alive. I had to hold you just to keep you from freezing solid while I waited for help." Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, and Ethan's own throat felt tight as a rope. "I am so sorry, Clara." She cut him off, her voice fierce. "I do not want apologies. I want to know why. Why would you risk our whole life for a few head of cattle? Why would you rather die alone out there than admit you need me?" The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Ethan took a long, painful breath. "Because I was terrified," he said, the words tasting like rust. "Every day I wake up and realize how much I need you. I feel that old fear of losing everything. I learned a long time ago that the only way to not get hurt is to never let anyone get too close." "But I'm not leaving," Clara whispered. "I know that in my head," Ethan said, touching his temple, "and in my heart. But a part of me is still that little boy who lost his mother and watched his father just give up. So when that fear gets big, I push back. I do foolish things to feel like I am in control." "Even if those things get you killed," she said quietly. "I was not thinking that far," he admitted. "I just thought if I acted like the tough rancher who handles it all alone, I would not have to face how scared I am of losing you." Clara was quiet for a moment, wiping her eyes. "That is the most honest thing you have ever told me." Ethan reached for her hand, and she let him take it. "Clara, my last thought out there was that I had wasted so much time being afraid. I was so busy protecting myself from a pain that might come later. I was causing a real one for both of us right now. And that was worse." "So what is different now?" she asked. "I finally understand," he said, his grip tightening. "The thing I was scared of, losing you, is exactly what I was causing. If I had died, it would have been my own fear that killed me and destroyed us. I do not want to live like that anymore. I want to love you and trust you and build this life with you." Clara studied his face, and a little of the hardness in her eyes softened. "You scared me half to death," she whispered, "and I realized that we are both afraid. I am terrified I am not a good enough rancher's wife, that you will see I am just a city woman who does not belong, but I choose you anyway. That is what I need from you. Choose me, even when you are scared." "I do choose you," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "And when that fear gets loud, you have to call me on it. Do not let me hide behind my pride or my work. Make me face it. Make me choose you." "I can do that," she said. "But you have to promise me you will value your own life as much as I do. No more foolish risks to prove a point." "I promise," Ethan said, and he meant it. Ethan. After that, things began to mend. As Ethan got his strength back, he became the partner he should have been all along. He asked for Clara's opinion on everything, from fixing a fence line to buying new feed. He shared his worries instead of burying them under hard work. It was not easy. The old habit of pulling away was strong, but then he would remember the bone-deep cold of that snowbank and the regret that came with it. And he would choose to stay close instead. Clara saw the change. She started sharing her own fears, and they learned to hold those worries together, offering comfort instead of solutions. When spring finally melted the last of the snow, they walked the ranch together, making plans. The cattle had weathered the storm better than expected, thanks to the preparations Clara had insisted on. "We should expand," Clara said, pointing toward the east pasture. "If we run a new fence and get a water source, we could handle another 50 head out here." Ethan smiled. "That is a big idea. I like it. We would need to hire more hands, build another shelter." "We can afford it," she said, showing him her little book of numbers. "The money we saved on lost cattle this winter can pay for it. We could double this place in 2 years." For the next hour, they stood there under the big Texas sky, building a future that was bigger and stronger than anything they could have made alone. Two people with different skills were working for the same goal. Neither was trying to be the boss, and both were listening to the other's ideas. As they headed back to the house, Ethan stopped and looked out over the land that was once his entire world. "I thought this ranch was everything," he said quietly. "I thought if I could just build it alone, that would prove I was strong and did not need anyone." He turned to face her. "You changed everything, Clara. You showed me that partnership is not a weakness, that love is the bravest thing a person can choose." Clara's eyes were bright. "You changed me, too. I came here to prove I could survive on my own. But you taught me that choosing to build a life with someone is stronger than going it alone." "We are quite a pair," Ethan said with a slight smile. "Two people terrified of connection who somehow built something worth fighting for." Clara smiled back. "The best partnerships are forged in fire, and we have certainly had ours." And they'd made it. Now they could finally enjoy the life they had built together. That night, with Clara resting beside him, Ethan thought about the wild journey that brought them here. Just 6 months earlier, a judge had given him a choice: get married or lose his land. It felt like a trap, a raw deal. He only brought Clara to the ranch to solve a legal mess, nothing more. But somehow, she became his whole world. She was his partner, his best friend, and the one person who saw right through his tough exterior and loved him anyway. She was the one who pulled him from the fire when his own stubborn fear nearly took him down. "Clara," he whispered. "Hmm?" she mumbled, half asleep. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not walking away. For seeing something in me worth saving, even when I was too blind to see it myself." Clara pushed herself up on one elbow, the moonlight catching her face. "You saved me right back, Ethan. I was adrift when I got here with no direction and no hope. You gave me a home. You gave me a reason to believe I could be more than what I was told." "I reckon we saved each other then," Ethan said. "We sure did," she agreed, settling back against his chest. The months that followed were the best Iron Creek Ranch had ever seen. With Clara managing the books and Ethan handling the fieldwork, they had the place running like clockwork. They grew slow and steady, adding more land and cattle without overreaching. They even built a network with other ranchers, sharing news about rustlers and market prices, helping each other out. Soon enough, the ranch had 8 full-time hands. The herd grew to over 400 head, and they even added a new wing to the house. They needed the room because Clara was expecting. The news had filled Ethan with a mix of pure joy and sheer terror. Loving someone else meant he could lose someone else. But this time, instead of building walls, he pulled Clara closer. He told her his fears, and she calmed his heart, promising they would face this new challenge the same way they faced everything else, side by side. "You're going to be a wonderful father," Clara said one evening on the porch. Her hand was on her belly where their child was growing. "How can you be so sure?" Ethan asked. "My own daddy was nothing but a bad example." "Because you know how to love," Clara said softly. "You know how to show up, work hard, and admit when you are wrong. You know how to be scared and brave all at once. That is all that matters." Ethan placed his hand over hers, feeling the tiny miracle they had made. "I'm still scared," he confessed. "Me too," Clara said. "But we are scared together, and that makes all the difference." Their baby girl arrived in the spring. She had Clara's green eyes and Ethan's dark hair, and she was perfect. They named her Sarah, after Ethan's mother. The first time he held her, something inside him shifted for good. This tiny, trusting person needed everything he had to give. There was no holding back, no keeping his heart guarded. She demanded his whole self, and Ethan gave it without a second thought, finally understanding that love was worth any risk. The years brought more children, a son named James, and then twin girls, Emma and Grace. The ranch house grew right along with them, and the quiet halls were soon filled with the sound of laughter. Ethan found that being a father was the hardest and best job he would ever have. Every scrape and fever sent a familiar panic through him, that old fear of loss creeping back in. But Clara was his anchor, always calm and steady. She reminded him that a man had to protect his kids, but he also had to give them room to grow. He taught them to ride and work the land. Clara taught them to read, to think for themselves, and to value partnership over pride. They raised good kids, strong and kind, tough, but with soft hearts, a perfect reflection of the love Ethan and Clara had built. 15 years after that judge had forced their hands, Ethan stood on the porch, watching his family. Sarah, now 14, was helping her brother with his lessons. The twins, at 9, were chasing each other through the garden. Clara had grown large enough to feed half the county. Clara came out and stood beside him, fitting under his arm like she was always meant to be there. Her hair had streaks of gray, and her face showed the years of sun and laughter. To him, she was more beautiful than ever. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how wrong I was," Ethan said. "About everything. I used to think a man's strength was in standing alone. I thought being vulnerable was a weakness. I figured love was the biggest gamble of all, a threat to everything I had." He held her a little tighter. "I was so busy protecting my land. I did not see that the land was never what needed saving." "What needed saving?" Clara asked, though she already knew. "My heart," Ethan said. "You saved it, Clara. You walked right into the fortress I'd built and talked me into tearing down the walls. You showed me that the one thing I was most afraid of, needing someone, was the only thing that made life worth living." "You saved me too," she reminded him. "I was so angry, so sure I did not need anyone. You taught me that a true partnership does not make you weaker. It just means you are sharing the load instead of carrying it all by yourself." They watched their children as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky over the ranch that had grown from 600 acres to more than 2,000. The Iron Creek Ranch was a success by any standard, but its real worth was not in the land or the cattle. Its success was in the family it held, the love that was its foundation. It was measured in children who knew they were loved and neighbors who knew they could count on a helping hand. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan finally asked, a question he had held in for 15 years. "Ever wish you had taken that coach back to Philadelphia?" Clara turned to him, her eyes full of warmth. "Not for a single second. This life, this family, you. It is everything I never knew I wanted. More than I ever dared to hope for. Even when it is hard," she added. "Especially then. Because the tough times prove that what we have is real. It proves our love is strong enough to handle anything. Any two people can make it when things are easy. We proved we could make it when things seemed impossible, and we always came out stronger for it." Ethan pulled her close for a kiss that held 15 years of their life together. Across the yard, Sarah yelled, "Y'all are so embarrassing!" Ethan just grinned and called back, "That is our job, darling." Clara smiled softly at the sound of their children's laughter. "We did all right," she said. He looked at the family they had built from a marriage the law had forced on them. This land was once his whole world. But now, the most important thing was the woman who taught him how to be brave, and the children who proved love was stronger than fear. He had married her to save his ranch, but in the end, that is not what he saved at all. He had saved his own heart. He learned to love and to trust again, all because he was brave enough to take a chance. The biggest irony was that the woman pushed into his life by a judge became the person he chose freely every single day. Clara Whitfield had arrived on his porch as an unwanted solution to a big problem, but she ended up walking away with his entire heart so completely he could hardly remember life before her. She saved him from a lonely life. In return, he gave her a home, a purpose, and the promise that she would always be valued for exactly who she was. Together, they built something that would last. They proved that a true partnership is stronger than stubborn pride. Ethan Hale fought like crazy to protect his land, but he ended up saving his own soul. Clara Whitfield came looking for independence, and instead found the greatest partner of her life. They both discovered that needing someone and letting them need you back was the thing that made them the strongest. And that is how a forced arrangement became the truest love story that part of the country had ever known, all because two stubborn people were brave enough to love each other. Model. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.